Yeah. Veronica's getting ready for a show tonight, actually. Where are you performing at tonight, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes. I am performing at a beautiful LGBT owned and operated establishment in the Five Points area of East Nashville called Five Points Diner. And we are doing our first weekly drag bingo show. We
Ooh,
do brunch here the second Saturday every month, but this will be the first time we do bingo here.
nice. All right.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Awesome. Well, so the name that you wanted me to use in the interview is Veronika Electronika, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. VERONIKA
Okay. And what are your pronouns for our audience?
In drag, I use she, her, or they, them, and out of drag is he, him, or they, them.
Okay. Is that
Well, I like to
typical?
see it. I basically say
Okay. Is that typical of a lot of drag performers that they have different pronouns for their character or persona?
it all comes down to the definition of drag performer because you have cisgender females that are drag performers and out of drag, obviously, they may be she, her, and in drag, they may be she, her, or in drag, they may be they, them, or whatever. So there's no, it's a case by case basis, and you just never know.
Okay. Well,
Hi, Stacey.
I want to start our drag story hour questions with what's the thing that you're most proud of working for Drag Story Hour? Like, can you give me an example of something you're really proud of, or is there a story that really sticks out to you?
Well, one thing I love about doing story time when I am able to do story time is I'm an educator at heart. I love to teach. I love to be around a teaching environment. So I feel like I am educating folks. Not only am I educating, children with the power of reading and all of that stuff, but I like to educate my peers and show that you can use drag and you can use theater to do all sorts of other things. It's not just about getting up and do a song. So I just feel like it's really, it can be a mind expanding experience by being able to do that. But unfortunately, the culture here in the South has been very limiting on how and where you can do storytime functions. So unfortunately, we've kind of had to put a hold on some of that. And the new legislation that's being put in front of the Tennessee General Assembly is only going to make that harder if it does pass for some terrible reason.
Now, when your organization holds an event at a library or a school or a bookstore, walk me through that process of what it's like for a child or a family attending that event, of how do they go about getting a part of it, and what is it like when they actually get there?
Well, a lot of it comes from the pre-planning. So you kind of sort of have to have it pre-planned. You want to know what your audience is. Are you going to be doing an audience for 5-year-olds? Are we doing it to 11-year-olds? Are we doing it to high schoolers? We've actually done some story time type of things with the entire family, like educating parents on how you do story time at home and making reading part of the family environment at home. You also want to make sure that your book is age appropriate, that you're not reading an 8th grade reading level book to a bunch of 6-year-olds. So that's a big part of it. It's just partnering with your local educators and other people that are part of it to make sure that you're selecting the right books. And I like to work with local authors as much as we can. And I will say working with private bookstores is a lot easier than working with public libraries, especially in states like Tennessee, where it's just hoop after hoop on using public spaces for LGBT themed events.
I mean, we hear the stories all the time of protesters being outside these events. Does that happen a lot, and how do you deal with it when it comes across?
It has happened. I was at an event in Cookeville, Tennessee, a while back. This was before COVID, and there were lots of protesters that were outside with bullhorn, and they wanted to take up seats inside of the event, so families couldn't take seats because there was a seating capacity. So we had to keep protesters from coming in. We had to do that by creating a voucher system. Like you had to go online and register to get a voucher in order for you to sit in. They knew that the city ordinance only allowed a certain amount of decibels to be on a bullhorn, or else it would violate the city. And the local police were going out and telling the protesters, "You're getting a little loud," instead of just arresting them when they got loud. They were allowing them kind of a pass to be able to stay outside and disrupt the event as much as possible, and just being very loud and very threatening as families were trying to enter and exit the library. And it was a public library.
Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, it happens. It can potentially happen even if the event is at a private space. They can be allowed to be on the public sidewalk to block entrance to a private space. So as much as they shout and they scream that these types of events are detrimental to children, they are not realizing that the events that they're doing are the type of approaching that can be just as detrimental and scarring.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think that
it does happen often?
Do you think that these protesters outside have more of a negative effect or a lesson than the drag performers do? And like, what kind of message do you think that these protesters offer the kids?
I don't think the protesters have anything to offer kids at all. I think, and unfortunately, a lot of times they will bring their kids with them, which makes it worse. Like they will have the whole family standing and protesting outside, and that's just not at like storytime events. That's at lots of different types of events. I remember when the Hustler Hollywood store opened in Nashville, that they were silent protesting with families like outside of where the Hustler store was about to open, and it was like wintertime. It was like in the middle of wintertime, and these kids were freezing, and it was just. I didn't understand the point of putting them through all of that. I didn't see where the benefit was.
I had no idea that was happening for events like that. And do you think that while they're accusing drag performers and other people of indoctrination and grooming, do you get the sense that they're doing that to their own kids in some way?
I think it's hard to say that whenever you involve a youth in any event, you can't call it some sort of a grooming or something. But I think that's just kind of sort of part of having youth with you when you're doing something like that. But you could say that. I don't know if I would say that, but it's definitely not a necessity that children are there part of that protesting. But it's unfortunately I have seen it, and it's really kind of unfortunate. But it is, it's scary on how often you do see children involved in a protest. When we're trying to do an event to enrich the culture and to enrich the culture of children and just being entertainment and trying to expand the minds, especially when a lot of the youth that are at these events are LGBT youth, or children of LGBT parents or family members. So we are just trying to expand on the acceptability of these family members and family units, and the protesters are just trying. I don't know if they're trying to expand on their family ties by making it a family event to being protesters, or I don't know. I'm not on that side of the aisle, but it's very unfortunate.
Okay. Well, sort of to transition from that. Why do you believe holding these events is so important? Like, why do you think it's necessary for children and even some adults to hear these stories coming from a drag performer or a queer person? And what are some takeaways that guests can have after attending these events?
Well, I think that it just comes down to just the artistic expression of the creator, right? Like so many of the popular culture, movies or comic books or video games or cartoons or whatever, they are written and directed and produced by LGBT people. And when you have an LGBT person engaging in the engagement of that project, I think it adds to the upholding that culture of where it kind of comes from. And I mean, you have so many different opportunities to interact with the world when you present it in that way. I think it just makes it really unique. And I think that as a drag performer, we kind of wear our soapbox under our feet. You know what I mean? You know, we wear 6-inch heels for a reason. And I think that sometimes, and it's not like we're reading politically motivated books. We could literally do story time and read the Wheels on the Bus. You know what I mean? And they would find some sort of political agenda behind it. But like, we're just here to have a good time. Like, there's actually a parody of the Wheels on the Bus called the hips on the Queen go swish swish, or something like that. So one of the Drag Race girls or somebody wrote a parody on that tune, the Wheels on the Bus. And like the lashes on the Queen go up and down. Like, it was something like that. I forget who wrote it or whatever. But I mean, when you're looking at something like that, it's amazing to think that somebody's going to find that to be a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand where the malice could be seen in something as innocent as reading a nursery rhyme. But I mean, I grew up with, you know, Romper Room, and like, for all we know, that was, you know, a person holding that magic mirror in front of their face. Could have been somebody in drag, or Teletubbies. I mean, Sesame Street. You know, all of these things where very rarely is it somebody in normal street clothes, with the exception of maybe Mr. Rogers, reading stories or interacting with children, that something to engage their imagination is always the pinnacle of what's happening. You know what I mean? So I think having a man in drag, or even a girl in drag, or a non-binary person in costume, I don't understand the difference between that and somebody that is wearing a fuzzy costume or dressed, you know, doing a puppet situation or whatever. I just don't see the big deal. It just seems like so many members of the conservative movement are obsessed with genitalia. You're like, why? I don't understand it. Like, I just don't see why they feel like they have to know what's underneath everybody's skirt in order to allow them to exist.
That's fair. I mean, on that topic, have you seen any families attend your events start to be more accepting of the LGBT community, or maybe even children coming out because of attending one of these events?
A lot of times those conversations are kind of private within the family, but I have had email conversations, and I have been involved in conversations where they say, my child has come out to me that they feel like they may be transgender, or they may be hinting at questioning this and that. So we feel like it'd be a good atmosphere to be at, so we can encourage more discussion. I haven't heard that. Never had like an offer call. Be like, which one of you all want to come out? Get to like the what sort? It's not what our this is for. But I think it can open opportunities for them to be able to have those discussions hopefully at home.
Is that a fair assessment of all these drag story hours? Of it's literally a conversation starter.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
Sorry,
like,
can you repeat that one more time? Your phone.
Sorry. Like, do you think that it would be a fair assessment to call any of these drag story hours or anything similar to it a conversation starter to help people start that conversation and understand there's more diversity in the world than you currently know?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's just like with any good book or any good movie. It's a conversation starter. It gets people talking. It allows for dialogue to be open ended, and I mean, it's just like any good teacher that, you know, you walk into the room and you got a question on the board, and then like the kids in the classroom start talking about what are we about to encounter here. So it's just about discussing. One of my favorite books to read at Storytime, I actually read it at Nashville Pride this past year, is a book written by Harvey Fierstein, the amazing Harvey Fierstein. And he wrote an adaptation on The Ugly Duckling called The Sissy Duckling. And it's a book about a young duck who just doesn't fit in with the rest of the flock. And he gets bullied a lot, and his dad doesn't understand, and the mom is very sympathetic. It's for the winter, and Elmer, the duck, the sissy duckling, he runs away. He decides to run away from home, and they fly away without him. And when the dad goes to fly away, he gets shot down by Hunt. Elmer finds him and nurses him back to health. And when the springtime comes and the ducks return home, they're like, "How did you survive?" And he goes, "My sissy son saved my life." And like, that's a very short paraphrasing of what the story is like. So there's lots of different messaging that goes on with a story like that, and we do it talking about. And I think the parents. It's a book written, I think, so parents can get the gist of the story, but I think kids can identify with the different parts of that story as well. And that's one element of how we do story time.
I mean, are there always parents or legal guardians present for most of the children?
Unless it's like a group setting. I did a story time actually in Mississippi, believe it or not. And it was like a youth center. So like there was a couple of like parents there, but not a parent for every kid.
Okay. I mean, I know that's just a concern a lot of maybe conservatives would have watching our episode of, making sure that there's enough legal guardians there in case something bad happened. There's enough adults around to stop it from happening if anything bad was happening, Yeah,
and I make sure of that before walking into any sort of an event like that.
Yeah. Now, can you talk more about this Tennessee bill? Because I've heard a little bit about it. And I want to get your perspective of someone that lives in Tennessee. What is that bill? What's going on with it? And why is it so dangerous?
Well, the bill that was proposed, I believe it's SB 003, which is it was like one of the first pieces of legislation that got presented to the Tennessee General Assembly after Election Day this past week. I believe it was presented and sponsored by the Tennessee Senate Majority Leader. Marissa, if I say anything that's not right, let me know, okay? I have an expert behind me. And as far as I know, I don't think there's ever been a drag show in the counties that his district is in, as far as I know. I don't even know where Madison County is. I should probably look that up. But anyhow, the bill is less than 2 pages long. The second page, the second, which is the half page, talks about the penalties in regards to what this would be. And in a nutshell, they are trying to eliminate the possibility of female and male and adult entertainment productions being done on public property or in private spaces that can be viewed from public property. And it would be a misdemeanor on your first offense and then a felony on your second offense, with possible jail time and heavy fines in all of those. So, for example, and I can go into lots of hypotheticals with it, but for example, the venue that I'm doing bingo at tonight, if this bill passes, I could potentially be arrested for doing it because there's big glass windows in the front of the restaurant. So if I'm performing a drag number and a family walks by the glass window, they could see it. And I could be arrested for performing a lewd act, even if I'm just lip syncing to the wheels on the bus, because it's viewable from a public sidewalk.
It is kind of weird how they always put like adult entertainment right next to like what's obviously referred to drag in legislation.
Yes, and Tennessee and Davidson County has some very strict rules in regards to adult entertainment. I actually was a host at an adult venue, like a legit adult venue, like a nude strip club. I was the hostess of the room for the male side of the Hustler, the Kings of Hustler strip club. I had to have a stripper license, even though I was only in drag, not stripping, but because I was working in that room, I had to be licensed as a sexually oriented business worker. So there are some very, very strict rules in regards to that. And I can't believe that they would try and lump into, but really who it's affecting are like burlesque dancers or like strip teasers or go-boys, things like that. They're trying to lump those people in with sexually oriented business workers, which are completely different things, and they're monitored completely different. But they're also trying to put drag performers, male and female, and all in betweens, into that category as well. And that's obviously not the case, because if that was the case, then every drag club in town or every building that hosts a drag show would have to become a sexually oriented business. And then they wouldn't be able to sell alcohol. And then they wouldn't be able to have proximity to churches or to other public spaces. So this bill, I don't think they really looked into the ramifications of what they're talking about, that billions of dollars that Davidson County alone takes in from liquor sales and beer and alcohol permits. I think that if they're trying to eliminate the fact that people drink in Nashville, this might be the right bill to go with. But if they're trying to not eliminate Nashville from being a party town and a music-oriented city, then they're going to have some issues, because it talks about, lewd behavior, or, when Nicki Minaj sells out Bridgestone Arena and she's humping the stage or wearing a low-cut top, is she going to be arrested because she's performing a perceived sexual act on stage and it's a public space? Or when the touring company of Priscilla Queen of the Desert comes to town and sells, thousands of tickets at Tennessee Performing Arts Center, which is also a public space and publicly funded in part, are they going to turn down millions of dollars in ticket revenue every year because there is a cross-dressing character in the scene? And it's literally across the street from the state capitol. I don't understand how they could put fine lines on the little drag queen that's trying to earn a couple of bucks by hosting drag bingo at a local restaurant and a multi-million-dollar concert that's happening downtown. Let alone cheerleaders that walk around in booty shorts and tube tops on the field at one of the local sports stadiums around here that are doing way more sexually oriented moves and things, and costume-wise, in front of thousands of children at the local football games. Mm-hmm. So where are they going to, where are they going to draw the line? And how will they draw the line? What does that look like? How can they cherry pick who and who isn't going to be a felon?
Yeah, one of the things in our piece is we're comparing this to, let's say, like Hooters or Twin Peaks or something. Like, that's perfectly fine and that doesn't get scrutiny, but a drag performer reading a book does get scrutiny. It's weird. But
that's not even to talk about the transgender issue in regards to this whole bill and the can of worms that talks about. And because, and I have the benefit of having, like I said, an expert right behind me. So correct me if I say something off color, but Tennessee is, I believe, the only state still left in the country where you cannot change your gender marker on your birth certificate after it's issued. So, in theory, any trans person that is walking and living their life in Tennessee that was born here, and they decide they want to do karaoke on Broadway as they dress as they do in their day-to-day life, if a legislator says that person is cross-dressing, they are in drag, they are performing, arrest them. I mean...
Yeah. It's a can of worms.
How do you police that? How do you enforce that? How do you pay for that? How do you tell who is going to be punished by this type of legislation? There's so little to work with because the bill is so poorly done. It's hard to comprehend the scope of it.
Do you think it has any real chance of passing because of how broadly it's worded?
I think there's a version of it that has a real chance of passing, but I think the first day in committee, I think that it's going to get tabled and it's going to get thrown in the back of the room by the way it's written. And I don't know if that was the point of it, that they just needed it as a talking point. It's a fundraising thing and a bone to throw to a lot of other conservative fundraisers, or if they know that they have a supermajority and they can push it through in one version or another. I don't really know, but luckily we have some really great, very smart lobbyists and organizations like Tennessee Equality Project and the ACLU that hopefully will take this under their wing and steer it in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, if people want to find more about you and your upcoming shows, where can they go to find that?
On my social medias, and you can find all of that at vedrag.com.
Awesome. And if they're interested in Drag Story Hour, where can they be directed to find the overall events?
I would suggest to go to the organization's home site that Jonathan runs out of New York, and then they can look for different venues across the country depending on their location, and sometimes different events that we do around the country they will broadcast online from there to everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and I know you have a performance in a couple minutes. I'll let you go, but thank you so much. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the LGBTQ community, check out this episode right here, or subscribe for weekly episodes. And if you like what we do and want some awesome merch, go to pbrmerchstore.com. As always, I'm your host, Professor Pride. Have a gay day, everyone, and bye for now.